G'day. I was just admiring my wife's touch football framed jersey. I always look at just her one and think how good she is at sport. There's a few others up there too. FTP Test, 3 different types of FTP tests. My personal example with them all. And which one to use? Which one should you use? It's very individual, but I don't think you'll get a definite answer out of this. Bad way to start a video, but what you will do is you'll just get a little bit of a better understanding of the 3 main types of FTP tests, forgetting just the pure 60-minute test. And as I said, my examples or my personal experience with those 3. 20-minute FTP test, by far the most historically popular one, losing a bit of popularity at the moment. The 2 times 8-minute FTP tests, we'll cover that one. And the ramp test, which is gaining a little bit of popularity at the moment with your online stuff like Zwift and Trainer Road. Let's start with 20-minute. As I said, historically it's the most used one and the most gone to one and the quickest one to sort of rattle off the top of your head. What it is, very basic, is essentially an all-out 20-minute test. So as many watts as you can put out in 20 minutes. And your marks could say, go, 20 minutes later, get your average watts for 20 minutes. Let's use watts, not heart rate today. There's pros and cons of the 20-minute test. Pros is it's so simple, and the protocol is so simple, and it's so repeatable in its actual protocol. The cons of it are it's a very, very tough one to get the pacing right. You can even be feeling top of the world at the 12-minute mark, and you've still got 8 minutes to go, so then you blow up big time. It's very hard to get that pacing right for the full 20 minutes. And you can also get your pacing under, so you can really underestimate your FTP and just sit quite low and get through your 20 minutes and think that was great. And then when you go to calculate your FTP, it's a lot lower than what your FTP or functional threshold power is. So the 20-minute test is not my favorite, it's not my go-to. Another con of the 20-minute is it's mental fatigue or mental anxiety before you head into the test, knowing that you need to get that pacing right, that you're about to do an all-out 20-minute threshold effort. So just the anxiety around that before you head into the test is, I see it all the time, people just don't perform their best because it's taxing. 20-minute all out, grab your best 20-minute average, then times it by 0.95. So ultimately finding a 95% of that 20-minute effort, you arrive at your FTP, which is a whole other video on how to use it, but this is just the tests. I'll let you know my numbers of all these 3 tests at the end. That's a hook. 8-minute test. 2 times 8-minute efforts. 8-minute balls out, 10-minute rests / recovery, another 8-minute all out. Take those 2 8-minute numbers, the 8-minute average numbers, divide that by 2, so find your average of that, and then you times that average 8-minute number by 0.9, and that gives you your FTP. That gives you your FTP using the 8-minute test. Pros, it's not as hard to get the pacing right because it's 8 minutes, so even if you're 6 minutes in, when it's really starting to hurt, you can mentally just think, only 2 minutes left to go. What can happen is you go really balls out in your first 8 minutes and you get that done, and then you don't really recover in the next 10 minutes, and your second 8 minutes is well below your first 8-minute effort. Got some pros, it's only 8 minutes, well 16 minutes all up, you know what I mean, it's only 8 minutes for that first effort, so mentally you don't get fatigued thinking about it, and you don't get as anxious when you go in to do it. It gives you a pretty, as I'll show you with my examples of my 3 efforts in my 3 FTP tests, how close it can be. The third one, third of the FTP tests is the ramp test, becoming very popular. It's used, like Trainer Road uses that, and there's a place for it, and it's pretty cool. So simply what that one is, just increases, you start off about 50% of your estimated or known FTP, and you just rise up 20 watts every minute until you can't pedal your bike anymore, until you're looking everywhere around for any help you can get. And each 20 watt increase just obviously gets harder and harder. So typically the tests last anywhere between 12 minutes and 16 minutes, sometimes up to 20 minutes if you've started a little bit too low on your first minute. And then to calculate that, you get the last minute completed, and you times that last minute, the average power in your last minute, by 0.75. So 75% of your last minute gives you your FTP. Pros, pacing's never an issue. You can't undershoot it because you're rising, steadily increasing up the ranks every minute. A negative, sometimes I see that people start a little bit too low. They might start at 160 watts for their first minute, so their test goes for 25 minutes or something like that. You only really need your test to go for about 12 to 14 minutes, 16, 20 minutes at maximum. Another pro is the anxiety levels. You just go into it. As long as you're warmed up, you just give it a good crack and just keep building. You can talk and chat in the first even 6, 8, 10 minutes of the test. So the test has started, but you're still comfortable. The negatives of the ramp test is sometimes it gives a bit of a misleading estimate of your FTP for if you're a full-blown sprinter or a really powerful fast-twitch fibre rider, because that last minute, if you can find sort of stuff from anywhere and punch out a good last minute power, sort of misleads our FTP to saying it's higher than it actually is. For example, what I've seen is a really, really good sprinter do that test, last 1 minute, really give it a good crack. So they might end up with 300, let's just pick 300 for an FTP, but then if you were to challenge that person to go and ride at 300 watts for an hour, they would not be able to do that, but their sprint is really good. So that's a negative of the ramp test. So they're the 3 ramp tests. So my 3 FTP tests using the 20-minute test, the 8-minute test, and then the ramp test. My numbers, not to gloat or to say, oh, look at me. It's just to show you how actually close they were. Keep in mind, I'm not a really good sprinter. I'm not a really good time trialist. I'm just a real average rider, just a roller. So just over sort of little punchy climbs, sort of dead roads are not fantastic. I'm just sort of average. So why these 3 tests were close for me, very close as you'll see, is I think it's because I'm just sort of that, I don't know what I am. I just don't know what I am. So if you're a full-blown sprinter, you'll probably test a bit better in the ramp test. If you're a really, really good time trial, your 20-minute test will show that. So my numbers. 20-minute all-out test, 388 watts for 20 minutes, times by 0.95 is 368. So my FTP is 368 using the 20-minute test. Have a listen to how close these are. The 8-minute test, I went and did 2 8-minute efforts, 10-minute rest. 412 watts for the first 8 minutes, 416 watts for the second 8 minutes. So the average of that divided by 0.9 gave me an FTP of 372. So 372, 368 for 20, that's very close. And then the ramp test, my last 1 minute was 494 watts. So times 0.75, or 75% of that is 370. So ramp test tells me my FTP is 370. So 368 for the 20-minute test, 372 for the 8-minute test, and 370 for the ramp test. So that's pretty close if you ask me. all within 4 watts of the 3 tests. As I said, I think they were so close because I'm not anything. I'm not a time trialer, I'm not a sprinter. I'm just really just an average rider that can sort of, you're not good at anything, so try and be half decent at something, I guess. So hopefully that brings up probably more questions than it answers. I don't know which one's right for you, but it gives you a bit of a rundown of what the 3 most popular FTP tests are and how close they were for me. For you, they'll be different. Back to having a look at my wife's touch footy jersey.